All because of one scamming rabbit, I ended up with a 10 billion debt and was executed over and over again. To pay off this debt, I chose the most lucrative profession, pharmacist. Originally, I was playing a game about climbing to the pinnacle of power, where players could freely choose their profession. But I selected pharmacist because I felt that being poisoned to death was too frustrating. However, as I crafted medicines repeatedly, I gradually discovered that selling drugs could bring me considerable profits. This gave me, a money-obsessed person, great satisfaction. In the game, everyone could compete for the throne. I thought having money would make everything easier. But how could the royal family's scheming and plotting be so simple? Thus, I faced execution after execution. Finally, I couldn't stand this game anymore. I had invested so much time and money, yet all it brought me was one miserable death after another. Just as I was about to remove my VR headset, suddenly, something seemed to flash across the screen. At first, I thought there was a problem with the headset. Suddenly, there was new information in the announcement. I immediately clicked on it, afraid of missing important details. What I didn't expect was a red little rabbit to appear. At this time, I still didn't know this was a scamming rabbit. This was an unprecedented notification method, and around its neck was a countdown timer. As the scamming rabbit opened the scroll in its hands, I saw this event's content. For just 10 billion, I could meet characters from the game, discounted by 10 million and only 1 minute remaining. I couldn't help but find it amusing. This wasn't even 10 billion game coins. Only a fool would pay. Even if it were game coins, I didn't have any. Let this spam message go deceive someone else. Just as I was about to click refuse, suddenly I froze. It showed that payment had been automatically accepted and completed, with automatic loan approval. I hurriedly tried to get a refund. The scamming rabbit smiled wickedly, telling me that special products prohibited refunds. Before I could think more, void fragments began appearing around me. Instantly, a white light sucked me in. In a daze, I seemed to be in an office. I only felt exhausted all over, as if lying on the floor. I looked up to see a familiar office. This was the game's scenery. At the same time, a bill appeared before me. My face turned ashen. Suddenly, it showed I had gained a new title, Deadbeat. After transmigrating, such a cute little fairy like me actually had to bear the stigma of being a deadbeat? I was instantly thunderstruck. Just as I was furious, I saw that scamming rabbit again. I must go find it and demand an explanation. At this moment, a girl appeared cursing at me madly. I couldn't help but look at her. A girl in a green dress named Alexandria. However, at this time, I was still more concerned about the system. After all, this was fundamental to my return. Seeing that I ignored her, Alexandria became even angrier and began cursing at me again, and started punching and kicking me. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. We're both royalty, so why can she hit me? I couldn't help but shout back at her. What I got in return was merely a second's pause. Then she began mocking me again. Suddenly, she pulled out a small whip, threatening to teach me a lesson. I couldn't help but be shocked. Is this what a child under 10 years old should do? A moment of mental confusion. My memories began merging with this body's previous memories. As the memories merged, scenes from the past flooded into my mind. Those were unbearable memories, and my head hurt more and more. I am Celestine. In the game, I was a royal deity, but I had transmigrated to before her rise. It was precisely because of these various unbearable experiences that she became a generation's imperial princess. Although I had died repeatedly in the game before, this time I cannot have my life ended again. According to previous memories, I should escape from this demon girl's hands, but occupying someone else's body inevitably made me feel guilty. The demon girl saw me resist and became even more excited, directly grabbing my beautiful hair roughly with one hand, and viciously telling me that servants are servants after all. Suddenly her hand loosened, as if gently caressing me. I thought she had a change of heart. Who knew this was the calm before the storm? She directly gave me a loving caress. In this crisis, I didn't want to think anymore. I turned and ran. The demon girl Alexandria kept cursing behind me and telling me to stop. I couldn't help but think only a fool would listen to her. Looking at the countless doors within the imperial palace, I immediately became happy. With so many doors, if I hide randomly, that demon girl won't be able to find me. At this time, I saw the little rabbit that had scammed me into coming here. Thinking about today's encounters, I instantly became furious and quickly chased after it. But after it went through a door, I chased in but didn't find it. After a bout of helpless roaring, I couldn't help but cry. Time passed, bit by bit. Looking at my little dress, I became vain. I found a mirror. Seeing how cute I actually was, I felt relieved. I'm so beautiful that suffering a little grievance is normal. I am the protagonist in the game after all. Taking advantage of no one being around, I opened the system panel again. What met my eyes was the main quest. I need to pay back those 10 billion yuan. I need to survive in this deep palace and become emperor, and there's a third condition that hasn't been unlocked. I was instantly dumbfounded. This is too difficult. There are 14 people competing for the throne, and if I can't complete the task, I'll be killed. I didn't even have time to feel sad before the demon girl caught up again. She grabbed my neck with one hand, suddenly giving me a direct task to fight back. If I don't fight back, I'll be killed. Right then, she grabbed my hair again. I really couldn't stand this childish girl anymore. I directly stood up forcefully and rammed into her, although I got the satisfaction of revenge. My head hurt terribly. But why did it become so quiet? I turned back to look at her. Drip. She was bleeding. Seeing the blood dripping in her hand, she also froze. Then I was met with her rage. How could this hothouse flower have ever been injured? Right then, the damn system issued another task, actually asking me to stop her continued bleeding. And the reward was only $10. I owe 10 billion, what a stingy system. But even at this point, she didn't forget to threaten. Just you wait. I ignored her and directly took out paper to stuff in her nose to help stop the bleeding. Thinking of her evil deeds, I reluctantly smiled at her, but she had a gloomy expression. At this time, a woman came in. She asked with concern, "Princess, are you all right?" I instantly felt my whole being perk up. She must be here to help me. I directly rushed toward her. Unexpectedly, I missed. She was concerned about the tyrannical demon girl, leaving me aside, just thinking how lonely I was. I heard the maid ask with concern again, "It wasn't that mute fool who bullied you, was it?" As she spoke, she glanced at me. But I'm really so innocent. Clearly, I'm the one being bullied. She also noticed that I could speak while she was amazed. I couldn't help but feel she still cared about me. Unexpectedly, she added another line. "Most importantly, you actually bullied Princess Alexandria." Then she gave me a lecture. She was even more worried about leaving scars on Alexandria's face. Doesn't anyone care about me at all? I saw Alexandria wave dismissively at the maid, but she's not a magnanimous person. When she faced me, a magic formation appeared under her feet, and magic began swirling around her. This is the power unique to royalty, because royalty is blessed by the golden sacred dragon. This power is passed down through generations. But I know royalty isn't allowed to use magic so casually. Looking at Alexandria's gloomy face, I could only pray silently. Right then, the system activated a new function again. This was the system's ability assessment. Unexpectedly, I turned out to be F level, even lower than the lowest D level. And my SSS plus level pharmaceutical ability that I possessed as a pharmacist was also sealed to D level. At the same time, Alexandria gathered a dark energy ball with one hand, about to throw it at me, seeing the maid rush toward me. I thought she was coming to save me. Who knew that after she grabbed me? She backhanded me with a big slap, then restrained me so I was being sentimental again. Seeing me restrained, she extended her hand, trying to make me kneel and apologize. This was tremendous humiliation. Facing such a desperate situation, I didn't hesitate at all. I directly lunged at her leg and bit down. I was instantly knocked to the ground. She gathered magic and was about to strike again. At this time, a magnetic middle-aged male voice rang out. I knew my savior had arrived. At only 6 years old, I suffered betrayal from my nanny. She colluded with Princess Alexandria to beat me up. At this moment, I was slumped on the ground. Just when I was in despair, a voice rang out, "Who dares to use killing intent in the imperial palace?" A red-haired man walked out. It was the Empire's Prince Highness. He looked grimly at Alexandria, and Alexandria was already trembling with fear. She clutched her dress tightly, muttering an apology. But the red-haired man didn't acknowledge her apology. He just righteously continued his criticism. She had attacked me, who was much smaller than her. That nanny wasn't willing to let Alexandria be humiliated by the prince, and actually interrupted the prince to accuse me. The prince just glared at the nanny, which scared the nanny into immediately kneeling and apologizing. He turned to look at pitiful me, then couldn't help but secretly sigh at how cute I actually was. I tentatively reached out my hand to him, and indeed he responded. Seeing how handsome he was also made my heart flutter somewhat. He suddenly asked, "Don't you fear me?" I was startled. After all, I had transmigrated here. I hurriedly pretended to look panicked, but he remained calm, as if he had already seen through me. Seeing that I wasn't afraid of him, he also began to be curious about me. Seeing him staring at me constantly, I immediately blushed, though I did think he was quite handsome. And right then, the system panel appeared again, displaying all the information about this man before me, and what I didn't expect was that such a handsome man actually had indigestion. Then the system prompt told me, since I'm a pharmacist, future system tasks will be primarily medical-based. Seeing me in a daze, he called for servants to take me for examination. But this was a good opportunity to cling to a powerful backer. Ignoring his assistant, I directly rushed toward the prince and hugged him tightly. Alexandria and the others nearby all stood there stunned. They thought such a cold prince would definitely attack me. But how could I be so tactless? I directly called out, "Daddy, don't leave me." He couldn't help but be moved, but he still refused me verbally. Fortunately, his assistant spoke up for me. At this point, I could only use my ultimate technique. I bit my hand, tears constantly swirling in my eyes, just keeping my head down without saying anything more. But my heart was actually quite calm. I introduced myself to him and told him I was very obedient. Then I told him I knew he was unwell and could help treat him, but he seemed somewhat dismissive. And for that 1,000 reward, I reached out my hand again. What I didn't expect was that he immediately noticed the wound on my hand and began caring about me. I hurriedly hid my hands behind my back and pretended not to care because I knew adults all like sensible children, and the more brightly I smiled, the more his heart would ache. As expected, he directly picked me up and told me from now on he would be my father. I nestled in his embrace. This was the first time I'd been so close to a man. I couldn't help having some fantasies about him. He didn't take me away directly. He called Alexandria's full name, frightening her into trembling all over. My cheap father directly warned her not to attack me again, speaking while glancing at Alexandria. Then he punished Alexandria while holding me, and directly ordered the nanny who betrayed me to be dragged out for interrogation. Then he carried me away. But at this time I fell asleep due to the system. But does this cheap father of mine really have no ulterior motives toward me? The next day I woke up from a 5-meter-long bed. I couldn't help but sigh, this is truly royal life. I felt the bed with my hand. It was actually so soft. At this time, a maid saw me wake up and immediately came forward to care for me. This was treatment I had never received. Through her self-introduction, I learned this woman's identity was not ordinary. She was the eldest daughter of a great family in the royal court. And this family had continued for 500 years, and their loyalty to the royal family was unmatched. Thinking that to become the future empress I would need some allies, I hurriedly, politely greeted her. And seeing that despite my noble status I had no heirs, she was also very fond of me, she carefully dressed me up, then was about to take me to breakfast. And on the way I hurriedly began probing, with my questioning sentence by sentence. I learned that I could probably permanently receive this prince's protection. But even so, how should I gain the prince's trust to complete system tasks? What I didn't expect was that just breakfast was already so sumptuous, and the prince indeed dined with us. Just as I was about to eat, the task panel appeared again, requiring me to hurry and treat the prince's stomach. I looked at the prince thinking of that reward money. My eyes couldn't help but light up. But the treatment process required silver needles heated by fire to be inserted into fingers. This put me in a difficult position. After all, anyone would think I was repaying kindness with ingratitude. But if I don't complete the task, I'll be erased. However, no matter what, I decided to try after finishing the meal. At the same time, the prince began inquiring whether I was a picky eater. In my previous life, I was a pharmacist. I deeply understood the importance of balanced nutrition. How could I be picky? I hurriedly denied it, and in the prince's eyes, I, a 4-year-old child, actually wasn't picky. He couldn't help but be surprised and became even more curious about me. Looking at the steak and fried eggs before me, my appetite opened up. At the same time, there was a golden roasted chicken ahead. But when I reached out to take it, a bowl of green bean soup was handed to me. Then I was given a serving of fried cabbage, and told since you're not picky, eating these is good for your health. I was instantly speechless. I just said I wasn't picky, not that I don't eat meat. With meat dishes in front of me, but I could only eat vegetables. How could I swallow this? At this time, it was still my cheap father who tacitly allowed me to continue eating. After the hearty meal, it was time for me to treat his illness. Looking at his back, I mustered up courage and decided to try talking to him about it. I ran toward him, grasping his big hands with both hands, saying sincerely, "I have something I want to ask of you. I want to treat your stomach illness." Before he could answer, I heard his follower ask, "How do you know His Highness has stomach problems?" Facing this question undoubtedly made my situation worse. How could I successfully treat him and complete the task? Facing this man who saved me from danger, I actually proposed using silver needles heated by fire, directly piercing his fingers, making him experience the pain of 10 fingers connected to the heart. Everyone was shocked at my proposal, and the prince's follower even suspected I wanted to torture him. I hurriedly explained this was to solve the prince's stomach discomfort. That follower actually still doubted my method, and the maids and others were even more incredulous. At this time, the follower suddenly said, "How do you know His Highness has stomach discomfort?" I hurriedly answered in panic with random things, like various behaviors of my cheap father while eating, and just when they were starting to believe, this damned follower, as if opposing me, asked again, "Then how did you learn these methods?" I hurriedly used the game setting, utilizing the sacred dragon that everyone believed in to explain. It was the golden sacred dragon teaching me in dreams, and told them that every day the sacred dragon would personally teach me some knowledge. Then I gave examples of some herbs. They watched me speak eloquently, and seemed to no longer doubt me. However, the follower still worried about the prince's health, And my cheap father was indeed a prince, very decisive. He dismissively said, "She's only 4 years old, what harm could she bring me?" Then he ordered people to prepare according to what I said. That servant also obeyed the prince's every command. Sophia, on the other side, was also preparing to help. I hurriedly called out to her and quietly told her what needed to be prepared, and after everything was ready, the prince, who had been confident, actually seemed somewhat panicked. Even his speech trembled slightly. I hurriedly acted cute, saying, "Daddy, should I be gentler?" Then I made what I thought was a very cute gesture, making him unable to bear refusing. I couldn't help but think, in this game I had played for 8 years, the White Leaf Palace controlled by the prince was originally the hardest to breach. And now I could actually live in it. I felt somewhat fortunate, but I still couldn't enter the most core areas. Right then, he directly interrupted my fantasy with words, directly saying, "I'm not your dad," trying to escape treatment. But fortunately, at this time, the maid brought the items I needed. Sophia asked worriedly, "Do we really need to pierce under the fingernails?" And I was confident. I seriously tied a bow for father. Seeing me serious yet cute, the follower covered his mouth and secretly laughed at the prince. First heat the needle. Then I grasped his big hand and directly pierced the acupoint. Task completed, and a new task followed. Even the royal physicians couldn't cure the prince's stomach illness. Yet I, a 4-year-old little girl, solved it with just 1 needle. As I finished the needle, the system also gave a notification that coins had been credited, and the prince also quickly acknowledged my medical skills. He looked at his thumb somewhat puzzled, then asked, "How did you do it?" I couldn't help but be stunned. This is medical technique even commoners would know. At this time, the follower beside also praised me repeatedly. I saw a big hand reach out. He affectionately ruffled my head, and facing his such favoring gesture, I naturally enjoyed it thoroughly. And at this time, the follower also revealed why the physicians couldn't cure it. It was actually because the prince was too imposing. No one dared to treat him. And no one expected I would be so bold. And at this time a new task came. My previous treatment apparently only completed 50%, and the remaining 50% needed medicine to completely resolve. Originally, I was somewhat dissatisfied with this task. But when I saw the reward was another 1,000 yuan, I was instantly full of motivation. However, the treatment medicine needed herbs from White Leaf Palace as raw materials, but this wasn't easy. You should know those herbs symbolize the core of this White Leaf Palace. And based on my previous life's experience, this White Leaf Palace was guarded by the prince. I had tried various methods but never managed to enter. But how could I gain the prince's trust? Looking at the reflection in the cup, I fell into thought. I very much yearned for my current life, being loved and cared for. But I knew all this was false. I somewhat hesitantly called out father. He seemed to see I was somewhat worried, but he mistakenly thought I was afraid of Alexandria's revenge. He just told me that girl had already been locked up. I denied this wasn't the reason, becoming somewhat reserved. After thinking with my head down for a moment, I instantly changed the question, looking up and calling to him. "Do you really consider me your daughter?" He looked at my restless little feet and gave me a positive answer. Looking at his wooden expression, I was helpless. But besides here, I had nowhere else to go. And besides me, there were many others with inheritance rights to the throne. If I wanted to survive here, I had to stay close to Prince Highness. And the prince at this time thought for a moment, silently thinking I was a good girl, then turned to look at me and said, "Go play." Then I suddenly asked him, "Don't I need to study?" Father actually told me if I didn't want to study, I didn't have to. Play freely today. If I wanted to study, I could start tomorrow. After he left, I began strolling in this garden, quietly enjoying my first leisure time after transmigrating. And right at this time, on the other side of White Leaf Palace, the prince and his follower began searching through large amounts of materials and chatted casually. But at this time, I had no way of knowing. I was the only one who could break his magic fake curse, and this was also the main reason physicians couldn't treat him. What no one expected was that this usual workaholic would actually think of me while working. Even he himself didn't notice. The corners of his mouth unconsciously turned up. At the same time, a file about me was searched out by many people, including the prince. I was originally a fallen royal despised by everyone in the nobility. Yet I received protection from the empire's coldest prince. Just because we had met once before, this also caused various powerful figures in the imperial palace to compete in retrieving my files. In their eyes, my receiving the prince's protection was on one hand just the prince returning to the capital with a playful mood. On the other hand, it was because the prince wanted to establish authority again. But even so, it was enough to make my status receive their attention. However, those who understood the prince knew there was another reason, which was that I resembled someone who once made the prince obsessed and willingly suffered years of underwater purgatory. And I was also the only one besides that person who dared to approach him. But this was only known to close associates. Actually, there had been another encounter between me and the prince, only I had already forgotten. At this time, the prince also took out my file. In the former empire, there were two major heirs. Although they seemed equal, there were actually undercurrents, and although I was a descendant of one of them, there was only information about my mother, with no information about my father whatsoever. This inevitably made these officials also looking at my file even more worried. A person with no background actually gained protection from the empire's first prince. On the other side, through torturing my nanny, the prince learned that because I spoke unclearly, I was treated as an idiot by everyone, and suffered humiliation from almost all servants. Even all my jewelry was switched out for fakes, and hearing this, the prince recalled our first meeting, when I also had no fear of him as now, and upon seeing him immediately wanted to play in the mud with him. He took out the world's most precious gem, the heart of devotion, trying to attract my attention to get rid of me, but I paid no attention, and insisted on playing with him. As he reminisced while listening to my such painful experiences, he then had people prepare new jewelry for me. At the same time, he put away that gentle expression, returning to his usual seriousness, saying somewhat coldly, "Open the 4th floor of White Leaf Palace to her." Having said this, the follower directly used carrier pigeon to notify Sophia, who was playing with me. And after the follower and Sophia learned this news, although they showed no change on the surface, their hearts were already in turmoil. At this time, I was playing in the garden. After I sat down to rest, I couldn't help but fall into fantasy. From my Prince Highness, to me becoming empress with endless wealth. Just as I was immersed in this, Sophia found me. This inevitably startled me. I was really afraid she'd think I was crazy. When I learned I could enter the 4th floor, I was also shocked, because I knew this 4th floor was the core of White Leaf Palace I wanted to enter. If I entered it, I had a good chance of getting the herbs needed to complete the task. And what I didn't know was that at this time, although the prince favored me, due to my unclear identity, he still had a guarded heart toward me. At the same time, this 4th floor was a space the prince had opened himself. My every move was under his surveillance. I really didn't know what kind of situation I would face next. Before I entered, Sophia was introducing me to the general situation of White Leaf Palace's 4th floor. The prince's White Leaf Palace originally had only 3 floors in its initial design, and that legendary 4th floor actually didn't exist originally. But because the prince was so powerful, he forcibly used his own magic power to open a dimensional space. From then on, this White Leaf Palace had a 4th floor. And it's said that in that 4th floor there are countless trophies, with jewels too numerous to count, and not to mention obtaining these treasures. Just entering to take a look would be the supreme honor of one's lifetime. As she spoke, Sophia showed a yearning expression. This made me wonder if she was yearning for the treasury or for Prince Highness. But seeing her so yearning, I asked, "Aren't you going?" and invited her to go together. And on the other side, in Prince Highness's office, he and his follower were still studying me. Although I was only 4 years old, all royalty, once they reached 11 years old, had to participate in the struggle for the throne. The follower beside also knew the dangers involved, and suggested directly taking me out of the palace to avoid this future disaster. The prince just thought for a moment, then refused, because princes who left the palace to numb opponents were everywhere. Outside was equally dangerous. Then the follower took out a detector secretly placed in my room. It could detect each royal's magic power, and my magic power was no different from ordinary people. This also meant I was the weakest existence in the throne struggle. The follower couldn't help but frown, but when he saw the prince still looked confident, he suddenly thought of something, and couldn't help but become nervous. The usually steady him also began to panic. Even his speech started to stutter. Are you serious?" The prince didn't deny anything, but said, "Is there a law saying it's not allowed?" The follower wanted to say more, but the prince directly interrupted him. "Just do as I say. Besides, a princess living in a prince's residence is already against protocol." But how difficult this would be. Countless people in this palace believed I had no future. My path was destined to have few supporters. At the same time, my mother also suffered infamy. This undoubtedly made the follower feel hopeless. But seeing the prince's confident face, the follower silently withdrew. The prince held the hair ribbon I had given him, and fell into deep contemplation. He envisioned each of my future enemies. While my circumstances inevitably stirred within him a protective instinct, he silently tightened his grip on the ribbon in his hand. And my path as a princess was about to truly begin. I had been regarded by everyone as a fool, yet suddenly I was now considered the reincarnation of the sacred dragon. The prince continuously spoke of the various suspicious aspects about me, although I had never received any education. I somehow possessed knowledge of medicine. As he spoke, he suddenly turned to his attendant and said, "She is the reincarnation of the sacred dragon." The attendant urgently inquired, "Are you certain of this?" The prince replied directly, "Whether she truly is or not does not matter. What matters is that if we say she is, then she is, and her various behaviors can indeed be interpreted as those of the sacred dragon's reincarnation." With such an identity, our chances of victory in the future succession struggle will be greatly increased. With that, he ordered the spread of news that I was the sacred dragon's reincarnation. The prince had not forgotten about Alexandria, who had previously bullied me. He made her write self-reflection essays daily, grinding the once arrogant princess's pride into the dust, while repeatedly intimidating her and implanting psychological suggestions. Alexandria at this time had long lost any ambition for power, and due to fear had become a timid person instead. They had no intention of telling me this news, wanting only to pave the way for me as much as possible first. At this moment, I was searching for plums, these fruits they considered poisonous. Yet I could use them to create medicine for treating the prince's hidden ailment. When I proposed entering the warehouse containing the plums, the prince agreed without hesitation. The prince also began preparing adoption materials for me, and instructed his attendants to find numerous child-rearing books. However, I was not yet aware that my adoptive father was actually a daughter-obsessed fanatic. Through my step-by-step processing, I finally had these plums properly pickled. After filtering out the plums, I obtained a delicious beverage. I dressed myself carefully and brought it to find my father, but unfortunately did not see him, only learning from the attendant that the prince had already gone to the divine palace. The attendant, seeing how disappointed I was, quickly explained, "The prince stayed awake all night yesterday, working straight until 4 in the morning, then went to train the troops." Thinking of his hidden ailment, I immediately felt concerned for him. I urgently begged the attendant to tell me the location of the training grounds. Considering my standing in the prince's heart, he told me the location of the martial training grounds without any hesitation. This was the nation's most rigorous military force, and in this usually strictly disciplined army, suddenly a small child burst in, running while shouting "Daddy," which inevitably drew everyone's attention. Looking at their strange expressions, I paid no attention and instead asked, "Where is the prince?" These usually rough soldiers also had their tender side, gently pointing me in the right direction. A stern voice echoed across the sky. "What are you all doing instead of training?" Then he looked toward me. "Sweetheart, it's dangerous here. How did you come?" Ignoring the soldiers' murmuring, I instantly rushed over, threw myself into his embrace, then acted coquettishly, "Daddy, you're being so fierce to them." He did not deny it, only said gently, "I'll be more careful in the future." The soldiers nearby, witnessing this scene, could not help but whisper among themselves. When had they ever seen such a tender side of the prince? However, when they saw my sweet smile, they seemed to be infected by it as well. Truly, cuteness is the universal currency. I then complained to the prince about his leaving without saying goodbye, mentioning that I had prepared a gift for him. Hearing there was a gift, his heart filled with joy, as no woman had ever taken care of him in daily life. With a snap of my fingers, Sophia quickly brought forward the iced sour plum soup I had made using the plums. Seeing the prince receive such treatment, the soldiers immediately became boisterous. But with just one look from the prince, the soldiers all swallowed their words back down. Just as he was about to say something, I directly interrupted him. "What's wrong?" He claimed nothing was wrong, but took advantage of my inattention to give the soldiers a stern warning look. Looking at the aggrieved soldiers, I quickly had Sophia take care of the prince. While I personally distributed drinks to the soldiers were naturally overwhelmed with gratitude. Which of them had ever tasted such exquisite sour plum soup? And who among them had ever received drinks personally served by a princess? What I had not expected was that the prince, seeing me care for others, actually became quite jealous. After I returned to his side, he acted as if nothing had happened. Then I discovered he was about to add ice cubes, and I immediately scolded him. "You clearly have stomach problems, yet still want to consume cold drinks." At this time, the soldiers were all full of energy, running to my side one by one to pledge their loyalty. The prince could not help but sigh. They seemed to have completely forgotten whose army they belonged to. However, seeing that I could get along so well with these soldiers, he was naturally pleased to witness it. Then he had Sophia take me back. I walked to the prince's side and grasped his hand, then leaned close to him and whispered a few words. After I left, he woodenly repeated my words. "Next time you can call me Little Cherry." The soldiers around him could not help but curiously inquire. An arrow's whistle cut through the air, and the prince said in a deep voice, "I see you've been enjoying your rest quite happily. Training intensity will be increased." The soldiers' faces immediately changed dramatically. After leaving the military camp, Sophia was to take me into the legendary 4th floor of White Leaf Palace. The portrait before me that bore such resemblance to myself was my mother, Kiana. One only needed to push this portrait aside to enter the 4th floor, which contained various spoils of war, from the world's most precious treasures to weapons that could dominate the realm. All were items the prince had acquired through years of conquest. I was particularly drawn to a crown among them. This was a crown forged from gold with gems embedded in the center, further enhanced through magical tempering. I found myself unable to look away after just one glance. Then I saw a crystal-clear blue gemstone necklace. After putting it on, I asked Sophia, "Can this be given to me?" What I had not expected was that this was something the prince had prepared for someone else, but that person would never return. Despite this, the prince still gave them to me. However, this was merely the beginning of my luxurious life. The very next day, as soon as I woke up, I began receiving meticulous care. Not only were all my clothes new, they were even woven with magic. Seeing how adorable I was, they actually became shy. Suddenly I received a task. The maid's heart rate is too fast, please provide treatment. It turned out that anyone around me who had the slightest physical abnormality needed my attention. While I was playing with them, they discovered injuries on my hands. I could not help but recall the scenes of being bullied by Alexandria. They were somewhat shocked, then took out ointment to help apply medicine to my wounds. Just as I was adapting to this kind of life, Sophia was about to begin teaching me. First was the royal family relationship chart, which was exactly what I wanted to understand. Listening to Sophia's explanation, I gradually realized this was not simply giving me lessons, but rather the prince helping me understand so I could conveniently compete for the throne. However, this suited my intentions perfectly. Looking at the bottom branch with my name written on it, I could not help but resolve. I must make this name reach the very pinnacle. Just then, a white cat suddenly appeared, and Sophia seemed completely unaware of it. The white cat suddenly spoke human words, "Do not panic, you are not dreaming." Seeing my expression change, Sophia thought I was too tired from studying and asked with concern whether I needed to rest. To avoid worrying her, I told her we could continue studying. After all, I had once been known by everyone as a fool, and I did not want to be considered crazy again just after changing their opinion of me. Seeing my complexion improve, she continued the lesson, taking out an object resembling crystal, from which came a voice for character recognition. I then discovered this was similar to a video recorder used for classes. Listening to her continuously speaking about royal family development history. This was largely consistent with the game settings from before my transmigration. Just then, I suddenly realized that I had transmigrated here. Several days of life seemed to have made me completely merge with this body, and my original memories seemed to be fading. Thinking of this, I no longer had the mood to continue listening to her lecture, feeling only endless fear. I knew I had to hurry. Yet here, I had encountered many people who truly cared for me. Although I clearly knew this was a game world, my feelings for them were all genuine. If I left, what would happen to them? For a moment, I even wanted to just stay here. Just then, the system interface appeared again, seemingly offering the option to purchase a function to see through others' thoughts. But before I could examine the contents carefully, Sophia interrupted me again. "Are you tired? Then let's end today's lesson here." I suddenly sensed someone watching me from nearby. Turning around, I discovered my father dressed in a suit. Seeing me look at him, he said, "You were so absorbed in learning that you didn't even notice when I came over." Suddenly, the strange white cat beside us moved. As I responded to my father, it walked toward me. I watched it dart up to the prince's shoulder in one swift movement. I could not help but wonder, could this strange white cat belong to my father? "Come with me." A deep voice interrupted my thoughts. He seemed somewhat troubled as he said, "You lack any proper princess refinement." Then I saw the pile of luggage nearby. Was he planning to make me leave? My expression immediately darkened. I instantly embraced him and cried, "Daddy!" However, he only said, "Taking you there might be a shock, but that's probably for the best." I immediately felt terrible, my mind in complete chaos. Was he actually finding an excuse to drive me away? Looking at his expression, I tried to see through his thoughts. But how could someone like this prince be read by me? I could only silently follow behind him. Suddenly, I remembered the system from earlier, and looking at his back, I instantly clicked to confirm the purchase. I knew my opportunity had come. However, after purchasing, I discovered there were only 10 hints, so I could only use them at critical moments. What I had not expected was for my father to bring me to a carefully arranged room filled with various gifts. I could not help but be surprised. "These are all for you." I instantly confirmed my suspicions. I had thought he was just teasing me earlier, but it turned out the prince had had people go to great lengths to create these for me. Others had asked him whether it might frighten my young heart, though I was indeed quite startled. Just then I received another system message. The importance level of those 10 hints was apparently random. I directly cursed it as a scammer. Unexpectedly, that wretched rabbit appeared again, holding a hammer in its hands. Without a word, it struck my head with the hammer, and I collapsed to the ground. The prince, seeing this, was somewhat puzzled. I quickly made up an excuse. This is the sacred dragon's way of expressing gratitude. I just did not know whether he believed it. Looking at the room the prince had carefully arranged for me, I could not help but feel moved. The disappointment from my earlier careless purchase mistake also faded away. Seeing the exquisite gifts, I quickly unwrapped them, discovering inside a box of neatly arranged art supplies. I formally expressed my gratitude to him. He then said with feigned coolness, "As it should be." However, looking at the decorations in this room, they were all artistic pieces. Could a child like me really appreciate these? I immediately collapsed to the ground. Seeing his confused expression, I again used the sacred dragon as an excuse to get through it. He affectionately ruffled my hair, then sat aside reading while letting me play by myself. I silently opened the system hints. I wanted to see why this hint was worth 1,000 yuan. I clicked on the next message, and my expression immediately soured. That message bluntly told me that if I did not repay quickly, I would face punishment. I looked through message after message, but none seemed particularly useful to me, so I decided to look at them later. Just as I was contemplating how to complete the mission, the prince suddenly called to me. "Why is it still a blank sheet after you've been painting for so long?" Then he said, "If you don't like painting, you can go play with something else." I quickly denied this. I made an excuse. "Daddy is too handsome, I'm afraid I'll make you look ugly in the painting." He turned and left, comforting me. Artwork cannot be created in just one attempt. I could not help but breathe a sigh of relief, having worried he would ask what I was doing instead of painting. The prince suddenly called me to his side, speaking about his twin sons. I could not help but worry whether the two of them would dislike my sudden appearance. He only affectionately ruffled my hair, then said, "If they are childish to that extent, I will stand up for you." Seeing him think so much of me, I felt somewhat at a loss. Thinking of these days when he played with me, and the joyful life celebrating my adoption, I could not help but feel moved, because before my transmigration, my father had passed away when I was very young, so my understanding of paternal love was quite vague. Sitting in the prince's embrace at this moment, I could not help but remember those past times. He suddenly asked me, what should a father be like? Thinking of all the various gifts he had given me, I hesitated slightly, then told him, someone who can firmly stand by my side at any time. Thinking of our meeting long ago, when I was crying alone, it was he who extended a warm hand to comfort me. At this moment he suddenly took out the hair ribbon I had given him before, then said, "Everything about you is correct, and if anyone refuses to listen, I will make them disappear." Then he began tying my hair. In this moment, I truly did not want to transmigrate back. Before this, I had been nestled in my father's embrace sleeping. An attendant came in to report work, but was scolded by my father, because he worried it would disturb my sleep. He spoke of reading child-rearing books, and the attendant looked thoughtful, then discovered this was actually a novel. My father quickly said, "I'll handle this later," to cover his embarrassment. Suddenly he discovered I had awakened, though I was still somewhat drowsy from sleep. To maintain a dignified image in my mind, he quickly began discussing work with the attendant. But the attendant said I was very fortunate, because my father had never been so gentle with anyone as he was with me. However, my father maintained his seriousness, then prepared to take the attendant to work. After leaving, the prince instantly changed his expression. It turned out the attendant was reporting on my adoption progress, and preparing to have my two older brothers return to meet me. On the other side, Sophia was also preparing an adoption party for me. At this time, the prince was plotting something significant, with even the attendant wearing a mischievous smile, because by the next morning, everyone would be discussing the announcement, stating that I would be adopted by the prince. However, almost everyone considered me, this princess, to be an idiot. But through the prince's maneuvering, after spreading the story of my using poisonous fruit as medicine, then speaking of my being a princess blessed by the sacred dragon, while using the experiences between Alexandria and me to demonstrate my benevolence, my image in people's minds had now completely transformed. However, at this moment I was sucking my fingers, and suddenly sneezed. I was still wondering who was talking about me behind my back. At this time, an old man was very surprised by my arrival. Having never seen royalty come to pick personally, he introduced me to every plant and tree here. Through my conversation with him, I not only suspected this world had no doctors, but also learned that royalty could heal through their own abilities. Once commoners were injured, if they ignored their wounds, serious consequences would certainly follow. The palace seemed to have only simple medicines, or one needed to go to the temple to purchase them. Those were gifts from the god of love. Because of this, the temple held equally high status. I inquired about medicine prices. When I heard it cost 10,000 gold, I was absolutely stunned. Did that not make the herbs in my hands worth their weight in gold? And seriously ill people, even if they found the temple, still had to wait a full year. Thinking of the commoner's plight, I knew this was my responsibility as a physician. I was still pondering why medical care was not shared with the poor. The old man beside me seemed to understand my thoughts as well. He praised my benevolence and gave me an apple. While tasting the apple, I contemplated how, as a princess, I could popularize medical care. Just then, a figure appeared behind me. I noticed him as well. Before I could observe him properly, he called me a finger-sucking idiot and said I was arrogant. Seeing I did not respond, he actually lost his temper. Then he arrogantly declared that he was the recognized Prince Jian. Faced with such an arrogant, brain-dead boy, I only felt he was not even as appealing as the apple in my hand. But why was he able to come to the prince's White Leaf Palace? However, I had better stay away from this kind of fool. But then I heard him boast This idiot runs away as soon as she sees me. I felt I should teach him a lesson, in the prince's name. While he was still chattering away, my sudden appearance made him instantly panic. As I grew angry, my eyes quietly turned pink. This was the color that only sacred dragon eyes possessed. He was still shouting loudly to give himself courage, but as I stepped forward, combined with my sacred dragon eyes, he hesitated. Thinking of Alexandria from before, it was the prince who saved me and gave me warmth. Now facing such a situation, just as I was about to explode, he seemed extremely frightened, instantly transforming into a simple drawing and disappearing from my sight. At this moment, my mood was excellent. I skipped along, preparing to tell my father everything that had happened. What I did not know was that everything that had just occurred was witnessed by two people. Yet I had not noticed them at all. One person said he did not want to interfere, while the other expressed wanting to try kidnapping me to cure his grandfather's illness. The redhead questioned my abilities, while the blonde indicated that since I was only 4 years old, it would not matter much even if I could not help. Then the redhead seemed to follow the blonde's lead, and both smiled wickedly while looking toward the prince who had just been frightened away by me. That foolish boy ran while cursing me. "Where are you going?" A voice rang out, frightening the foolish boy into trembling. He also noticed that magical formations had appeared beneath the feet of the person blocking him. After confirming through eye contact, this was someone not to be provoked. If I had been present, I would have discovered this person bore a 9/10 resemblance to the prince. Just as the foolish boy tried to run, the blonde appeared behind him. At this time, he began inquiring about my identity. The two had no intention of telling him. He seemed to have anticipated his fate, directly falling to his knees begging for forgiveness. Faced with his pleas for mercy, the two smiled disdainfully, then generously indicated just apologize to her and it will be fine. But his hands began moving, followed by a scream that echoed throughout White Leaf Palace. At this time, I was beside my father recounting what had just happened. He was also helping me tie my hair, seemingly quite skilled, probably because he tied my hair every day. He told me he usually reviewed these documents. So many documents made the staff exhausted and absent-minded. When I said I wanted to stay here, the two became quite excited and began caring for me, probably finding it more relaxing to spend time with me. As I prepared to paint, that talking white cat appeared again. However, even now I did not know whether that was the prince's cat. My hands were not idle either, and in moments a masterpiece was completed. The prince also took the painting, and I saw his expression change, as he seriously asked me, "Have you seen this cat before?" I had never seen him so serious. After hesitating, I still gave him a definitive answer. He fell into deep thought. Then another snap of fingers, and to my amazement, the white cat passed through a magical formation and jumped out, then greeted me. My father then introduced this as his familiar beast, which generally could not be seen by others. Only now did I understand this cat truly belonged to the prince. However, I immediately wondered, could it be because I had a good relationship with the prince that I could see it? The prince then explained that the conditions for seeing required at least half-dragon power, and only strong members of the royal family could possess familiar beasts. Yet I not only lacked half-dragon power, I was even quite weak in combat. My father poked my forehead, then affectionately ruffled my hair, saying, "You are a princess, blessed by the sacred dragon, so everything is normal." Then he asked back, "Even his two foolish sons have familiar beasts." I could not help but suspect my familiar beast had left after I was born, finding me too weak. Then I thought of that wretched rabbit, probably someone's familiar beast as well. I suddenly had a thought, and urgently asked the prince what the emperor's familiar beast looked like. Unfortunately, he did not know. I could only pray it was not the emperor's familiar beast, or I would be in trouble for offending that rabbit. At this moment, a scream interrupted my thoughts. A maid was kneeling on the ground, having accidentally broken a pot. Although she was quite panicked, I felt it was just a false alarm. While she was cleaning up, I noticed the wound on her hand and immediately began inquiring. She explained it was from polishing candlesticks yesterday. Suddenly I thought of the ointment I had used before. Just as I was about to run get it, a large hand grabbed me. The prince told me that royal items could not be given to people, especially those blessed by the temple. At this time, the maid also spoke to dissuade me. I was directly lifted up by the prince. The maid was searching for something on her person. I saw her take out a box of hand cream, and I discovered it was completely different from what I had used before, even emitting a foul stench. She said this was purchased 10 years ago. This was extracted from a plant. Hearing this, I could not help but gasp in shock. Not only because they did not consider expiration dates for medicines, but also because this flower was originally a highly toxic drug, with extremely severe side effects. I frowned deeply, then told the maid Eva not to use this. But she believed medicines became better the longer they were stored. I felt completely exasperated. At this time, a large hand rested on my shoulder. She said the maid could be sent to rest and recover. Eva actually expressed not wanting to leave me. My father only said coldly, "Should I let you stay here to continue breaking cups?" Eva could only leave dejectedly. I walked alone through the palace feeling dejected. The system presented a new mission. I needed to create ointment to save 92,824 people, including Eva, with only 3 months as the deadline. And I had to find these patients to treat them. As a reward, I would receive 100 million yuan, but failure would result in the danger of death. This worry kept me awake all night. Even when I woke up, I was still calculating how to be more efficient. Suddenly, Sophia came to find me because today was the party for the prince's adoption of me. Amid a series of trumpet sounds, the party began. I came here with Sophia. We had just arrived beside the prince when footsteps could be heard. The red and yellow duo appeared before us. The two greeted the prince, and they were my 2 older brothers. The red-headed brother looked cold and distant, while the blonde brother appeared enthusiastic. I tried my best to make myself as adorable as possible, to win their favor. The blonde walked quickly toward me, but the moment he approached me, his expression changed dramatically as he said, "Are all these your calculations?" I was greatly alarmed inwardly. He had actually seen right through my thoughts. Suddenly, he became much more amiable, stepping forward to stroke my head and smiling as he told me he was just joking with me earlier. This guy's face-changing speed was like the prince's earlier behavior of sternly scolding soldiers 1 second, then speaking gently to me the next. At this time, the prince also instructed the two to get along well with me. The blonde boy indicated he certainly would. However, compared to him, I preferred the stoic older brother who resembled the prince. Suddenly, someone poked me. The blonde boy said he wanted to take me to their secret base. Seeing that my stoic brother did not object, I agreed. Then, I saw a treehouse. At this time, my red-haired stoic brother also reached out to pull me up. The blonde brother turned back with a smile, and a golden magical formation appeared out of thin air. This scene left me stunned. He brought us both to the treehouse. I felt his teleportation technique was exceptionally poor, though the two of them seemed accustomed to it. At this time, the blonde brother first apologized to me, then said he needed to ask me for a favor. He first mentioned my experience making medicine for my father. Honest stoic brother also said he hoped I could agree. They wanted me to treat their grandfather. I suspected their grandfather was the emperor. Then he spoke of wanting to make a deal. Suddenly, he smiled wickedly, listing my enemies, saying that at present I was just one person, and as long as I agreed, they would protect me. I pondered with my head down. As long as I could heal grandfather, my status would rise accordingly. At this time, a hand was placed on my head. He comforted me that it would not matter even if the treatment failed. Then he said that like the blonde brother, he could fight 10 people. He told me that even if I did not agree, they would not stand by and watch me be bullied. He was so sincere, how could I bear to refuse them? I also learned that grandfather not only felt dizzy, but also developed red spots on his body and had no appetite. I pondered for a moment, thinking of pollen allergy symptoms I had seen on television before. But how was I to treat this? They planned to bribe the emperor's secretary, then find an opportunity to provide treatment at the festival 1 month later. At this time, I also thought, this would be my opportunity to complete the system mission of saving those 90,000 people. That meant I needed to prepare the ointment within 1 month. But would they let me treat poor people for free? Suddenly, my brother called out to me. He had noticed something unusual about me. I could only brush it off with a laugh. However, when I thought about having to treat the emperor in public at the age of 4, I couldn't help but feel exasperated. Suddenly, he changed the subject, asking if I truly desired nothing at all. Then he told me he had expected I would refuse him, and finally mentioned that I could speak up if there was anything I wanted. He listened with a kind expression, while what I wanted most was just one thing. After leaving, I began preparing the medicine. The old lady mentioned that the remaining sour plum soup I had made earlier was all consumed by the kitchen servants, though they had to taste it daily, which inevitably caused stomach problems, but I was happy to be able to help them. Subsequently, I carried an oil barrel to prepare for making it in the backyard, since the small yellow flowers from the garden were essential ingredients. It was only then that I learned for the first time that the traditional art of face changing was mastered by everyone in the prince's household. At this moment, the old man directly helped me pick many flowers, and soon more servants joined the picking team. But then the old man, who had been smiling cheerfully just a moment before, suddenly breathed fire from his mouth, angrily scolding them for not doing their proper work. The other servants expressed their dissatisfaction, because they genuinely had good feelings toward me. This way, the picking was quickly completed, and I also understood that they were not only doing this for me, but also because the prince treated them with sufficient respect. Then I should live up to their expectations and work hard on the preparation. After a series of operations on my part, the bulk of it was completed, requiring only a month of settling time. At this point, I told the maid Sammy that this was actually made for her. She was stunned at first, then let out a scream that echoed through the forest, and then burst into tears of emotion, immediately saying she would go through fire and water for me, then rushed over and hugged me. This hug was truly forceful, so tight it nearly suffocated me. At this moment, the maid Sammy asked me why I didn't use the magic from last time to make the medicine directly. Faced with her inquiry, I could only awkwardly tell her I didn't know either. When I answered her this way, she readily accepted it. At this time, grandmother also said that my medicine-making scene reminded her of her childhood. Back then, the temple forbade commoners from making medicines, and people like me who made medicines would be called witches. She also picked up a flower crown and placed it on my head, and comforted me that since people nowadays don't know medical arts, I wouldn't be called a witch anymore. At this moment, the prince was also holding a heart-shaped gift box, with Sophie naturally waiting once again. At this time, my two brothers also came here, and the blonde brother's attitude toward me had completely changed. He snapped his fingers, and many gifts fell from a magic formation. Faced with everyone's mountain of gifts, many of which were given to curry favor with the prince. At this moment, the prince waved his hand, a magic formation appeared, and fireworks burst directly in the sky. Grandmother also told me this was the signal that everything was ready. When I arrived here, I discovered the party was quite exquisite, with an enormous 9-layer cake as well. The non-mainstream duo was very happy to see me. They praised the flower crown on my head. The blonde elder brother actually grasped my hand, asking gently if I had prepared something for him. However, before that, I naturally had to give it to father first. After father put it on, the red-haired young man became even more frantic. When faced with me giving flower crowns to my two brothers, the blonde brother indulgently let me put it on him. Seeing this, the red-haired elder brother was directly petrified, then shouted that he wouldn't wear such a thing. I acted coquettishly, saying that wearing it would make him a good brother. He became nervous, and somewhat shyly said he didn't want to wear such a delicate thing. I felt awkward, but faced with ID's mockery, he directly snatched the flower crown away. I immediately told him that if he snatched it, he definitely had to wear it. Although he said no with his mouth, he still obediently put it on. ID said he was more handsome. Then the two began competing for favor in front of me. At this moment, father suddenly picked me up, telling me the adoption procedures were completely ready. But I always felt something was still missing, so I asked my brother where mother had gone. I noticed that both their expressions had changed. Just when I suspected she had met with misfortune, they playfully told me that our parents had simply divorced. ID said that mother wasn't suited for life in the imperial palace, and handed me the cherry he had removed. I also learned that mother was the dean of Yansha Academy, and my two brothers attended this school, which showed that this mother was quite intelligent. I was also very eager to meet mother. At this time, ID also expressed that if mother knew I had been adopted, she might reconcile with father. Suddenly, father asked why red-haired Gil hadn't brought his report card home, frightening my brother into trembling, while ID snickered on the side. Subsequently, the prince said that tomorrow the report card must be placed on his desk. At this time, father let me choose one gift from among them to open, and I had just selected a gift, when a message prompt appeared directly, and the information also hinted that I could purchase again after using it, naturally suggesting I continue opening the subsequent prompts. The result was naturally as I expected. I could obtain an item that allowed me to freely choose rebirth time points. This way, I would be practically invincible. However, this commercial street not only had extremely high entrance fees, but the treasure chests were ridiculously expensive. So I decided to wait a month to receive the mission reward before going to the commercial street. Seeing me lost in thought alone, father picked me up saying he wanted to show me a treasure, but he brought me to the front of a large tree. He said these two trees were called ID and Gil respectively. Everyone in the family would plant a tree named after themselves. Bringing me here was to plant a tree for me, and although he could complete it directly with magic, the prince chose to do it personally, which moved me deeply. At this time, my brother and Sophia and others also came here calling for me. Such a warm scene made me never want to leave them again. On the other side in the imperial palace, a plate was smashed on the ground, with a maid trembling and kneeling beside it. And such a vicious master was naturally Alexandra. What reaction would she have? I was just playing around with a fool, yet I was confined by a cold prince. This prince conquers in all directions. In my view, calling him ruthless and vicious wouldn't be excessive. And I, who am originally above 10,000 people, Princess Alexandra, a strong contender for the next emperor, how could I possibly let them off? But while I was in confinement, I actually heard that this ruthless man adopted that fool as his daughter. In anger, I directly broke a servant's head. What I didn't know was that, the next day the maids actually dared to openly discuss me in the corridor. And the maid Jessica, whose head I had broken, was now nervously looking at me. I enjoyed her fear, inquiring about how many gifts Princess Celestine the fool had received at the party. But this maid actually dared to fantasize about walking with Celestine. Seeing her silence, I directly insulted her. She's merely the daughter of a country baron. Being able to serve me is already her great honor. At this moment, she seemed to have been wronged. Just as I was about to explode, a voice emerged, probably around 3,000 or so. He looked harmless, but his voice was unusually gloomy. The moment he made eye contact with the maid, Jessica turned her head away, as if just one glance made her fear the youth. And when she came over, even I hadn't heard any footsteps. His shadow seemed to sway with the candle. Then he said kindly, "The gem I most wanted was also sent to that Celestine." He approached me while saying, "Rumor has it that Celestine's father is of dragon lineage." My heart was naturally unwilling. He was once just a fool I could bully at will. Suddenly he placed his hand on my shoulder, whispering in my ear, "Celestine illegally concocts medicines." Then he also told me, "The Pope has just passed away, and the new Pope is about to arrive at this imperial palace." I instantly understood this was my opportunity. I only needed to publicly expose her to make her unable to recover. And that ruthless prince would definitely be implicated as well. Adopting such a fool, they deserve their bad luck. So I instructed them to contact Jubilia to implement my plan. Then Princess Celestine was doomed. In this world, each person's pet can only be seen by themselves, yet I could see other people's. My father told me this was an ability that only those with half-dragon power could possess, and I had been tested as having no magical power. However, my father showed no surprise, saying I was the reincarnation of a sacred dragon. He could be so calm only because his 2 sons could summon divine beasts at the mere age of 12. He also promised me that he would have my 2 brothers summon divine beasts for me to see. At this moment, I was saying that Brother Gil was despicable, just because he refused to summon his divine beast. Faced with me clinging to his leg and pleading desperately, he actually told me he had to go train. And I was so persistent because I worried that the useless rabbit was his divine beast, though that rabbit was more likely to be the Emperor's divine beast. Seeing that he had already begun sparring and was immersed in it, I could only give up. My medicine had probably been completed by now, so I had someone take me to the kitchen. Sammy was very happy to see me arrive. At this time, the ointment had begun boiling. I leaned over to check, just taking a deep breath. I could smell the faint floral fragrance. At this time, adding some crystals. The ointment was completed. Suddenly, a system pop-up appeared before me. Unsurprisingly, it was another sales advertisement. It wanted to brazenly swindle my money, actually comparing me to those medicine peddlers. But watching time pass, I still clicked confirm. Instantly, that system interface turned into a beam of light and disappeared, then directly flowed into my eyes. After confirming repeatedly, there seemed to be no effect whatsoever. Could I have been deceived? And as the medicine finished brewing, there was only one last step, using magic power to solidify it. I had thought I would find a magician to help me complete it, but unexpectedly, Father came personally to help me. As soon as he arrived, he held me in his arms. I had thought he was free, which was why he came personally. Subsequently, I discovered there was a crowd of people outside the door, looking for the prince to handle official business. And these people were all very tired. The prince said he hoped I could see Daddy often, but I thought Father was most handsome when working. Hearing me say this, he decided to continue working. When they saw that one sentence from me could make the prince continue working, the staff outside the door all expressed amazement. However, with one glance from the prince, they immediately quieted down. But the prince still sent them away first, deciding to spend time with me before going to work. Looking at the ointment I had made, he actually asked if I had prepared one for him. But why would someone so strong need it? To avoid awkwardness, I still said I had put his in a better box. He was quite expectant. As magic flowed from his hands, the ointment solidified one by one. I also took out one box and gave it to Sammy. The system panel appeared telling me I had completed the mission, simultaneously rewarding me with 100 million gold coins, instantly giving me the feeling of being a wealthy woman. I decided to buy that 50 million random treasure chest, as I called out. But nothing happened. It turned out it could only be opened in the Dragon Commercial Street. At this time, Father also bid me farewell, saying I could find him for any needs. Any needs? I hurriedly ran up and grabbed him, telling him sincerely I also want to learn to use magic. Then he began explaining to me. My dragon heart could allow me to use magic, but I could only learn magic formations. Then he rubbed my head, telling me I could go find my brothers to learn, and when I came to find my brother, he brought me outside a palace. I thanked the attendants for taking care of my brother, and distributed the prepared ointment to them. The exquisitely packaged ointment made them excitedly discuss it on the side. I decided to melt their hearts, then said, "Please take good care of me." One of them even cried while exclaiming, "I'm so much better than ID." Then expressed hope that I would visit often. A voice emerged, and several people's expressions immediately changed. Naturally, it was my brother ID. Several people also apologized to him one after another. I directly threw myself into my brother's embrace, and he immediately became much gentler. I also looked expectantly at him to teach me magic. As my brother invited me inside, several people were stunned. Upon entering his office, the red-haired elder brother left to prepare for sleep. I also took out the necklace that Father had me bring to him. But after he examined it for a while, he put it on me instead, saying I needed this thing more than he did. And ID actually recognized at a glance that this was something Father had prepared for me. What I didn't know was that this was actually the world's only magical artifact, and Father could also ensure my safety through it. At this time, he was also boasting that I was his adorable daughter, which made the people in the meeting very awkward. The attendant asked if he was so worried about me, why didn't he go together? Unexpectedly, the prince was because I said he was most handsome when working. which caused other staff members to suffer greatly. Several people also secretly discussed that my father seemed to be a daughter-obsessed man. Just then, the prince looked serious, because he discovered someone pretending to faint, attempting to attract my attention, and they didn't recognize this person. But looking at his pupils made them somewhat panicked, because this was a race that should have been extinct. At this time, I still didn't know that danger was right in front of me. On the other side, my brother was teaching me magic, then he picked up a formation, and saw that paper flashing with golden light disappearing in the air. Then golden light scattered in all directions. Then he said with affected profundity, "Magic is a discipline." However, I thought he was very handsome, so I directly threw myself onto him. But he spoiled the mood by saying, "Do you hug whoever you want to hug?" If I could beat him, I really wanted to give his head a knock. I could only angrily wave my hand, saying I did not. Suddenly I noticed that my silly brother seemed to fall asleep as soon as he looked at books. I was also too embarrassed to wake him up. Subsequently, I bid farewell to ID, preparing to go out and play for a while. As my door closing sound rang out, he also picked up the book, stretching while reproaching ID, saying that the chick hugs whoever she wants to hug first. ID explained that he was afraid I was too naive and would be taken advantage of. But why would I be called a chick? Then he handed the silly brother a letter, which said the Pope had died. The silly brother naturally didn't think it was anything, but AD analyzed the seriousness within. He said if I became the new Pope's wife, then his chances of competing for the throne would greatly increase. However, he didn't plan to wrong me, but the Pope would inevitably marry a princess. The two also decided they must protect the chick. Suddenly, silly Gil asked, "What does the new Pope look like?" But ID only knew he had black hair and red eyes. At this time, Gil suddenly said, "Then isn't the person in front of Celestine the Pope?" And the reason he knew everything happening on my side was because he possessed eyes that could see through any object. Therefore, he was about to jump out the window to come to my side for protection. At this time, I was walking in the forest. Suddenly heard what seemed like vomiting sounds. I walked closer to look, and discovered a silver-haired boy sitting against a tree, and his face was covered with sweat. His handsomeness truly made me somewhat mesmerized. However, I instantly realized he needed to regulate his breathing, and hurriedly went forward to check his condition, taking out the paper that had previously contained ointment, using the remaining fragrance to alleviate his physical discomfort. I hurriedly asked with concern whether his body was feeling better, and he also looked better as he thanked me. Suddenly, he grasped my hands, looking at me affectionately and asking if I was a princess. Then introduced himself, saying his name was Pavel. I just felt this name matched his temperament perfectly, and his handsomeness carried a hint of cuteness, seeing him staring at me continuously. I asked somewhat awkwardly what was wrong, but he said there was a small bug on my head, which immediately frightened me until my face went pale. My scream directly swept through the garden. With my panic, he also helped me deal with the bug. I coquettishly expressed my thanks to him, but suddenly felt myself taking flight. My silly brother directly lifted me up, also questioning whether Pavel had intentionally fainted to attract me. I was really afraid he would faint again, and hurriedly asked with concern how his condition was now. With Pavel's happiness, my brother was naturally furious, and directly carried me away. Pavel expressed that we would meet again next time, but Gil suddenly turned back, quietly warning him. Watching us leave, he smiled, seeming to have some different kind of joy. Suddenly his expression changed. He even wanted to abduct me right now. However, due to Alexandra's plan not yet being completed, he was originally from the demon race, serving Alexandra for certain reasons. He casually folded a paper airplane to track me, so he could understand my movements at any time. And on the other side, I arrived at the Dragon Commercial Street. Just as I was feeling curious, I suddenly heard, 100% Yuan can win the big prize summon. It was actually a gacha machine, with the most valuable item being the Dragon Scepter. Although I knew it was a trap, I still wanted to try once. After all, I was a lucky person. I confidently turned it. Facts proved I was indeed overconfident. After being scammed with tears, I still decided it was better to activate the treasure chest. Following the system prompt, I selected Confirm Purchase. And another purpose of my coming here was the rebirth dart. I knocked on a shop door. Inside was a red-haired girl with long legs. She expressed surprise that I was a human. I knew dragons valued etiquette after all, so I obediently greeted her, making the excuse that this was to buy a gift for Grandpa. And her favorable impression of me also increased accordingly. I casually browsed around, and actually discovered that this dragon race could openly sell medicines, which even included specific medicines for Grandpa's illness. Just as I was about to inquire, she directly said that she had spent a lot to find these medicines. I realized I couldn't expose my needs too early, so I decided to look for the rebirth dart first, but I couldn't see the items on top of the cabinet. At this time, she reminded me that I could use magic to fly up, and she called the royal family purification humans. After she came close to observe me carefully, she discovered my dragon heart, and seemed to also see the problems with my body. She immediately pointed at the void, and a formation appeared under my feet, lifting me into the air. I also saw the prices of the items above, and was instantly stunned. However, the system panel also appeared accordingly. She introduced that this item was a dimensional summoning scroll. Then wouldn't I take off directly if I summoned the pharmacy over? Then I saw a dart. And this was the rebirth dart. I somewhat awkwardly tried to negotiate with her, hoping she would make it a bit cheaper. She asked how much a bit was. I somewhat embarrassedly said to make it 4,000 yuan cheaper. She seemed to not have expected this. Then I hoped she could give away some items, and said I would take care of her business. My cuteness seemed to work very well on her, and she directly gave me the medicines I had my eye on. I could only try my best to keep my smile from being too maniacal. But she thought I was uncomfortable, and just as she came up to check, the door made a huge noise and even cracks appeared in the walls. She angrily opened the door, and shadows seemed to move in the sandstorm. Then a black-haired, red-eyed man appeared. From his mouth he actually called out my name from before transmigration, then fell straight down, and I was completely in shock. I hurriedly went over to help him up. He slowly opened his eyes, but he called me Celestine. Could I have misheard just now? His hand also touched my cheek, but in an instant fell to the ground again. The dragon girl beside me was now disgusted by the foul smell on this person. She said this wasn't just the smell of blood, but the odor of filth. I was immediately alarmed. Hearing this, the people nearby also began discussing among themselves, and we were instantly isolated. At this time, the system panel issued another mission, again with pitifully small rewards. But even without the mission, I would save him. Looking at the weak youth lying on the ground, I first took out the hemostatic agent I had just purchased, then prepared to bandage him. At this time, the dragon girl came over to help, directly driving away all the onlookers. She said that after bandaging, it could also eliminate some of the smell. Suddenly, this youth let out a low growl, and I could only comfort him to bear with it for now. Looking at him lying weakly on the ground, I became somewhat absorbed, then was deeply attracted by him. Even the dragon girl beside me joined me in praising his handsomeness. We instantly realized we were focusing on the wrong issue, because at this time, the wounds on his body were actually increasing. At this time, the dragon girl seemed to see the clue, explaining, he connects his future world self with his present self, so he needs to obtain divine blessing or dragon protection. And he came here seemingly for dragon protection? Suddenly she stared at me blankly, saying he might also have come to see me. After I finished treating him, he suddenly grabbed me, then struggled to stand up, saying he had finally found me. Just as I was puzzled, his face turned pale, his body swayed unsteadily, and he fell directly into my embrace. So I brought him home and hid him in my wardrobe. Perhaps we knew each other originally. I could only wait for him to wake up to ask him. And this person, who had been seriously ill the night before, actually got up early the next day and stood by my bed, looking at me sleeping peacefully. He couldn't help but sigh. Still, no matter when, you would always bring seriously ill people home to treat them. He said he returned to purgatory for my sake, because in his view, a future without me was still like purgatory. Looking at me sleeping, he took out a silver white flower as a token. Right after he left, the maid discovered my room door was wide open, originally thinking I had already gotten up, but when she entered, she found I was still sleeping. Several days later came the time for the celebration. At this time, I was getting dressed and made up, still holding the flower he had left in my hand. My heart was still complaining that he had left without saying goodbye. But how did he know he could find me again? Could it be that in the future I trusted him so much that he even knew my real name? I wouldn't meet with misfortune in the future, would I? Perhaps we would meet again. Several maids began selecting dresses for me at this time. I sat in front of the dressing table accepting the makeover. First was an elegant and graceful ponytail, then pure and cute twin ponytails, but in the end, I chose the dignified loose hair look. Everyone unanimously gave full marks of approval. Then I began eating heartily. Silly Gil directly kicked the door open, frightening me until my face turned ashen. ID praised my beauty, but Gil was a straight man. Just as I was talking about him, he completely ignored me and began rubbing my face. I directly went to play with brother ID, leaving him alone in bewilderment. And before departure, I naturally didn't forget my medical bag. I was going to take this opportunity to treat everyone. On the way, I asked what gifts the two had prepared for Grandpa. The two showed mischievous smiles, then looked at me with ill intent. Soon we arrived at the Imperial Palace, and the decorations in this palace were indeed magnificent. Compared to my inexperience, my two brothers looked completely calm. There were even vases made of pure gold. Then they prepared to take me to the banquet venue. Both extended their hands. Seeing me stunned, ID said tenderly, "Don't you want to hold their hands and go in?" But as soon as I took their hands, Gil frightened me by saying to be careful that Grandpa would eat me. Although ID denied it, he also said that someone had been scared unconscious before. Fortunately, I brought a veil today. But I didn't bring it because I was nervous. After all, the person I was going to meet today was Leo Hold, a man who dared to slay dragons. Now the world only knew of his majesty, but I thought he must be very lonely. Accompanied by an angry roar, the three of us walked into the banquet. Inside was a sea of people. And I also marveled at the grandeur of the royal banquet, but I noticed someone glaring at me. Looking carefully, I found it was a chubby boy. He arrogantly walked up and said, "Hey!" But my two brothers directly ignored him and led me away. He unwillingly called Gil's name, earning only my brother's merciless feigned ignorance. Before transmigration, when I played this game, Gil was the character I played most. But after transmigration, I discovered he was actually so mischievous. The chubby boy arrogantly mocked father for adopting me. Gil and the others' expressions were each different. As he became more excessive, Gil had an intimate contact with him. The chubby boy flew and scraped against the ground. Gil warned him to watch his language, but he remained incorrigible. I just felt he had no manners, but accidentally said it out loud. He then wanted to teach me a lesson. Just as I panicked, it was actually ID who stood in front of me. I had thought he wouldn't care. He warned the chubby boy. And for verbal attacks, ID was most skilled. With just a few sentences, the chubby boy was already speechless. Then he led me away gracefully. Sitting between the two of them, looking at the silent ID. I just felt he had been extremely handsome just now. At this time, horn sounds rang out. And Gil also reminded me to stand up. Even the chubby boy from before stood up with us. Because the Emperor had appeared, he commanded everyone to sit without any emotion. And I also took advantage of this opportunity to dare to secretly observe him. A man with natural authority, more like a middle-aged handsome man. The system panel appeared accordingly, providing relevant information. But he was actually allergic to peanuts. Most speechless was that despite being allergic, he had eaten them for 3 years. Then the system gave out the mission. At this time, the Emperor announced the beginning of gift presentation. Under my gaze, an old man walked up. He brought out a 10,000-year ginseng. ID and I naturally saw at a glance that it was fake. Only silly Gil was still marveling. The Emperor took a close look, then waved his hand. That gift presenter was dragged away. Just like that, he rapidly processed one after another, while people were constantly being dragged away. And those who remained all received rewards, which were actually blank checks. I couldn't help but marvel at Grandpa's generosity. At this time, I noticed someone cough. It turned out to be that chubby boy. He very affectedly called out Grandpa, then put on a show of cuteness, finally presenting a gift box. Watching this made us 3 siblings nauseated. And Grandpa only said flatly, "Next." At this time, ID whispered to me, "We're giving our gift now." Then he told Grandpa they wanted to give a special gift, which was his sister Celestine. I was directly dumbfounded on the spot. They didn't care about my embarrassment, but confidently said they believed I could solve Grandpa's physical problems. Grandpa only said flatly, "Come to the front." Although I had some helplessness, I still came to the front. But since things had come to this point, I could only give that chubby boy a live demonstration of what the true master of cuteness was like. I directly gave Grandpa a triple dose of coquettishness. Just as I began saying I could treat him, the system panel suddenly popped up, actually tempting me with huge money to call the Emperor's name. How detestable! And that Emperor at this time seemed to have seen something. I couldn't help but feel nervous, because I always felt he had seen that pop up. But at this time I heard everyone's discussion again. They spoke of my ignorance, saying I was nothing but an idiot. Although Gil was angry, he was also stopped by ID. The Emperor waved his hand and interrupted everyone's discussion. He asked if I could take responsibility for my words. I naturally agreed wholeheartedly. At this time, he also came in front of me. At that moment, my brother asked if I knew what the problem was. And I actually said the Emperor was taking poison every day. Upon hearing this, Gil was greatly shocked. Seeing how incredulous he was, I felt quite speechless. Then he pinched my face and complained about Grandfather's strictness, while ID had great confidence in me, simply because he thought the Dragon Clan had told me. Despite everything, I was extremely happy, because this time I had 3 missions. First, distributing the ointment would earn me 100 million in rewards. Second, treating the Emperor would get me 1,000 yuan. And finally, getting the Emperor to drink other beverages could also earn me 100 million yuan. Compared to my joy, Gil was panicking terribly. At that moment, I suddenly heard the Emperor's illness flaring up again, and voices of distrust toward me came from inside the room, with some even arguing endlessly about it, going so far as to swear on their future. I couldn't help feeling somewhat angry, ignoring my brother's attempts to stop me and walking straight over, directly opening the door, wanting to confront him face to face. I had been full of confidence, but then I froze in place, never expecting the Emperor to be right there in front of me. He said I didn't need to personally welcome him, and at that moment, the 3 of us were all stunned. However, as the little king of cuteness, I naturally acted coquettishly, saying I wanted to see Grandfather quickly. Then he sat down arrogantly, gesturing for me to begin my performance. I first had my brother bring the Emperor's menu, and the doctor beside us mocked me, asking what was worth recording about food. I looked at him with displeasure, and after opening the menu, I was instantly stunned. From breakfast to afternoon tea to late-night snacks, everything was peanut-related. I deduced he had started eating peanuts 3 years ago, and his condition worsened every autumn. The rash on his neck seemed to confirm my suspicion. The The previously arrogant white-haired man was also very puzzled about how I knew this. Naturally, because autumn is the peanut harvest season. Both of them looked confused, and I explained that peanuts were like poison to grandfather. Grandfather then realized someone might be trying to harm him, and immediately asked how I knew this knowledge. I awkwardly said a divine dragon in my dreams told me, then explained that the drawing with 2 horns was a dragon, wasn't it? Faced with my vivid performance, grandfather seemed to believe me. Then I took out the potion I had prepared beforehand. Looking at the medicine bottle in his hand, he suddenly asked coldly how I had obtained it. The atmosphere in the room instantly became tense. Indeed, this money wasn't easy to earn. It seemed I needed to give him a satisfactory answer. I told him that whenever I wished, I could meet the divine dragon in my dreams. I tearfully complained to the divine dragon about grandfather's poor health, and he only comforted me. But when I woke up, I found medicine the divine dragon had left beside my bed. Finally finishing the introduction of the medicine's origin, they all looked speechless. But I truly did get it from the dragon clan. Then one person suggested finding someone to test the medicine first, but the emperor picked up the cup and drank it all in one gulp. Then I also instructed him not to drink peanut wine anymore, and I had prepared some medicinal wine for him. He stroked my head, saying, "Just like the beverage you made with poison fruit?" The emperor knew even such small details, which greatly shocked me. ID then inquired whether the emperor's condition had improved. Upon receiving confirmation, my system panel appeared again, and I earned 1,000 yuan as a reward. The man who had mocked me several times before suddenly called out to me, apologizing for his previous unreasonable suspicions. I quickly indicated that it was in the past and not to worry about it. After all, facing such a gentle and refined gentleman, how could I bear to blame him? With his self-introduction, I learned he not only had a medical license, but could also study in the temple. I quickly grabbed his hand. After all, I still had to treat those 28,721 people, and might need his help. He also said he wanted to learn some medical knowledge from me. I then showed him the ointment I had made. Looking at this shabby wooden box, he appeared confused. Then I rummaged around, finally finding the deluxe packaged version of the ointment. At this time, ID also spoke of my hard work in making it, hoping it could be used to heal the people, and finally praised me, saying I had a boundless future. The emperor then looked at me with interest, and after affirming my talent, asked how I hoped to use that ointment. Naturally, it was for the people. I knew my chance to complete the mission seemed to have come. Then I suggested distributing it to the people, using the excuse that my brother also supported me greatly. Faced with Gil's reaction, I just glared at him, and he quieted down. The emperor also instructed the physician to cooperate with my actions. With his help, I felt more confident. My favorable impression of the emperor also increased greatly. However, I hadn't seen their divine beasts yet, so how could I be willing to leave? This is a world of temporal chaos, and I had traveled through time, yet encountered a stranger who could call out my past life's name. He seemed to come from the future, yet had returned to this place filled with painful memories. In this kingdom that worshipped the god of love and trust. As the chosen one, he was imprisoned by the temple in the basement. The temple forced him to drink unicorn blood, making him a puppet pope. He suffered greatly, only able to eat tasteless food. But to change the future and protect Celestine, he willingly endured it all. At that moment, the sound of guards arguing came from outside the door, their conversation filled with contempt for him. One of them opened the door, only to be stunned by the scene before him. The boy who had been cowardly and weak yesterday was now standing there calmly and composed, completely transformed. He began giving orders to this guard who had previously bullied him. The guard found this sudden transformation hard to believe, but he just turned around indifferently. As long as he could change Celestine's future, he was willing to go through fire and water at any cost. Meanwhile, on the other side, the maids were discussing today's events with me. I boasted about myself to them without any restraint. After hearing this, the maids became even more devoted fans of mine. I picked up the mirror and found they had dressed me particularly adorably, and Sammy had even cut bangs for me. Just then, I heard footsteps. It was actually Father who had come. As soon as I saw him, I rushed over acting cute and asking for a hug. Father also lovingly lifted me up high. I told him about treating Grandfather Emperor's illness. My handsome father then carried me to bed to rest. Before lying down, I told Father I felt Grandfather Emperor was very lonely. He was stunned upon hearing this, and I explained that everything the Emperor cherished was slowly disappearing. Father looked at me tenderly and said I was the second person to say this. The first was my mother. Hearing it was Mother. I asked Father to tell me stories about Mother, but he declined. However, Father couldn't resist me in the end, and told me Mother was as persistent as I was. Father's eyes were filled with regret as he recalled that Mother loved horseback riding. I told him I wanted to learn too, and Father tucked me into bed for early rest. Then added that he could have my brother teach me first. Just thinking about my brother's divine beast being a lion scared me terribly. At that moment, father suddenly called my name. He gently kissed my forehead and promised he would support me in doing anything. The next day, originally wanting my brother to teach me horseback riding, I was trembling with fear, because I was riding on his divine beast. My second brother asked with a cheerful expression what was wrong with me. I threw myself into the maid's arms to complain and blamed my brother for being reckless. Second brother angrily said that learning to ride horses was naturally like this. Seeing I was still angry, he defended himself, saying it was to help me learn quickly. Then anxiously apologized to me. Suddenly, second brother's face turned red. And then he actually started acting cute in a straight man way. I was rendered speechless by second brother's dramatic contrast. After acting cute, he began to withdraw into himself, and I felt my brother had suddenly become like a younger brother. Seeing him like this, I suddenly remembered one of my main missions was to support him in becoming emperor. But he currently had no interest in the throne, only caring about whether I was still angry. I called out his full name in confusion and asked why he was so good to me. Upon hearing this, he angrily pinched my face and scolded me for being disrespectful. At this moment, the mission panel appeared again, actually asking me to repay 10 billion and become the heir to the throne. Upon hearing I wanted to become emperor, second brother suddenly began to worry. I was concerned he was thinking about how to eliminate me as a competitor, so scared that I closed my eyes tightly. But his warm hand touched my head, calculating how to help me become emperor. At this time, my gaze turned to my brother's divine beast. I cupped his face, hoping I could also have one. I speculated that I didn't have a divine beast, possibly because I was a time traveler. My brother leaned close to me and said the divine beast's soul would perish together with its master. Hearing this, I hoped even more that the cat I had seen before could become my divine beast. What I didn't know was that when the maid was returning home at night, she was stunned by what she saw on the road. It turned out to be the two princes and that fat guy who had bullied me that day. My brothers wanted the fat guy to apologize to me but were refused. My eldest brother then extended his right hand, letting his body be surrounded by a ring of golden flames. The fat guy was frightened and cursed him as a monster, but eldest brother just smiled dismissively. The fat guy seemed ready to fight back, but who knew eldest brother appeared behind him in an instant. The fat guy broke out in cold sweat, because 3 layers of magic circles had appeared behind him. Eldest brother easily subdued him and made him promise never to bully me again. The fat guy was pressed to the ground and reluctantly agreed, but who knew eldest brother had recorded everything, and even grabbed the fat guy's hair, telling him to come to the palace tomorrow to apologize to me. The fat guy was so scared he lay on the ground not daring to move, only able to agree. With this, the two brothers left satisfied after venting their anger for me. The fat guy cursed unwillingly, wondering why the two princes could be so powerful from birth. At this time, a sneaky voice caught his attention. The fat guy looked around but couldn't find the source of the voice, and saw a pill quietly roll to his side. That voice said eating it would give him what he wanted, but required his soul in exchange. The fat guy at this time had been blinded by hatred and swallowed the pill. Not far away, a silver-haired youth was watching all of this. He wickedly imagined what would happen next. Soon, both princes returned to the palace, but eldest brother showed signs of fatigue and could barely stand. Second brother supported him, concerned about his condition. Eldest brother knew in his heart this was the side effect of the dragon clan using magic. He lowered his eyes, feeling he could get through it. Second brother told him not to force himself and to hurry back to rest. Eldest brother looked gratefully at this understanding younger brother before him. After saying goodbye to his brother, eldest brother stood alone, his heart filled with ambition to ascend to the throne. He looked at mother's will on the table, feeling in his heart that becoming king was also mother's wish. Because the people disliked tyrants, the eldest prince had always pretended to be kind. But I, his little sister, had seen through this, and I always showed that I was closer to the second prince. Thinking of this, the eldest prince felt a strange emotion in his heart. He suddenly sat up, realizing he actually felt regret for not gaining my affection. He couldn't understand it at all. Just then, the sounds of me and second brother playing came from outside, and he became even more troubled, so he snapped his fingers, using magic to block out the outside world. This was because he possessed extraordinary hearing. After the confusion, he finally closed his eyes wearily. His dreams seemed to fall into memories. In his childhood, he had killed a dove, while his younger brother felt guilty for not protecting the dove. Their parents came and saw all of this. Mother comforted him, saying it was normal to feel annoyed with his extraordinary hearing. The eldest prince only wanted to kill everything that could make noise, except for his younger brother. Mother then had the eldest prince learn to distinguish good from evil by imitating the second prince's actions. She gripped the eldest prince's shoulder tightly, firmly believing he could do it. Father brought the second prince closer to them, telling them that as long as they remembered to always protect their family, they wouldn't lose control. For the eldest prince, Celestine was the person he wanted to protect for life. After an unknown amount of time, I woke my brother up to help me choose a dress. Eldest brother's lips curved up gently, silently determined to protect the carefree me before him. Today I had styled my hair beautifully, put on a little dress, and was dressed up beautifully all over by the maids. My devoted maid fans were once again enchanted by me. I asked eldest brother if I looked good, but eldest brother coldly said it was average. Hearing he didn't praise me, my face soured. Then he gently set down his teacup, and tenderly told me deep red suited me better. It turned out I had wronged eldest brother. He was more serious than I had imagined. I then jumped onto his lap, intimately nuzzling his face and saying thank you. But eldest brother instantly froze. I was called by the maids to try on clothes, so I jumped down from my brother's lap. I still looked at him with concern as I left. I saw eldest brother standing there alone, lost in thought, thinking about the approaching day of hunting the giant serpent. Eldest brother carefully instructed the maids to prepare winter clothes for me. The maid held a red dress, but I only cared about whether the giant serpent was scary. Eldest brother smiled and said it was very cute, but I remembered this was the final boss in the game. When I played the game before, I had lost several times at this point. While I was changing clothes, eldest brother was still reminding me not to run around when the time came. I dressed up completely, moved close to my brother and asked if he wasn't busy today. Why hadn't he left yet? Unexpectedly, eldest brother said he came specifically to see me all dressed up, then looked at me teasingly. I felt eldest brother was in a particularly good mood today, so I asked what his divine beast was. Seeing him hesitate, I looked at him with pleading starry eyes. He put down his book and said he would show me right away. I fearfully covered my head, worried it might be a fierce beast. I saw him raise his right hand, and it was actually a little flying squirrel. I couldn't imagine such a cute animal was actually eldest brother's soul fragment. The little flying squirrel climbed onto my shoulder to snuggle. I lovingly held this little creature and introduced myself to it. But the next second I sneezed, scaring the little flying squirrel away. Eldest brother asked if I was all right, and I said I was fine, probably because the weather was cold. Then he picked up a shawl and covered me with it. He also meaningfully told me this was a signal that winter was coming. I asked eldest brother why he liked winter the most, and he explained it was because everything was quiet in winter. I told him I loved spring and summer the most. He was suddenly curious about how I knew he liked winter the most, and I realized I had let something slip. Seeing me frantically trying to explain, eldest brother couldn't help but smile. Hearing someone coming, I quickly changed the subject. The maid reported that the fat guy had arrived. I didn't know what good deed eldest brother had done. I sat on the sofa and instructed the maids to withdraw. The moment he entered, I sensed something seemed wrong. I saw the fat guy walk in slowly with a pale complexion and dark circles under his eyes. Eldest brother calmly asked what the fat guy was looking for him about. The fat guy kept his head down without answering. I looked at the fat guy somewhat fearfully. I saw the fat guy suddenly struggling as if suffocating. I carefully observed all of this. The fat guy's eyes were vicious and he was drooling. I fearfully shook my brother's arm. Eldest brother also sensed something was wrong and protectively shielded me. The fat guy seemed to have a headache again. I saw him suddenly scream madly that he was the emperor. Eldest brother pushed me away to protect me. Just as I was about to fall heavily to the ground, I fearfully closed my eyes tight, but I didn't feel any pain at all. It turned out eldest brother's divine beast had protected me with its body. I worried about eldest brother's safety. I saw on the other side of the room, eldest brother and the fat guy seemed to be in a standoff. The fat guy said viciously that he wanted to usurp the throne, but eldest brother's expression remained calm. The fat guy was enraged by eldest brother's contempt. He destroyed the entire room in a fit of madness. I was also knocked to the ground by the aftermath. The air was filled with the smell of sulfuric acid. I looked around searching for traces of my brother. At this time, a maid walked in and hugged me tightly, quickly taking me away from this dangerous place. But then she and I were knocked unconscious by a mysterious force. People outside were desperately pounding on the door. I worried that once the door opened and oxygen entered, this place would become dangerous. At this time, the mission panel appeared again, indicating I was currently suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning. Was I going to be reborn here again? I heard a snap of fingers. Father had come. When I woke up, I was already lying in Father's arms. Father comforted me, saying everything was fine. But my eyes still slowly closed. At the other end of the castle, the silver-haired youth was using his third eye to spy on everything that had just happened. He found it boring and closed his third eye, instantly transforming into the appearance of an innocent youth. Recalling the foolish fat guy, the silver-haired youth smugly played with that pill. This was a pill that could amplify human greed. However, thinking that he had confirmed the eldest prince's strength, the silver-haired youth smiled with satisfaction. He recalled me from last night, panicked and frightened, and actually laughed gently. Then his eyes emitted an eerie light. To obtain me, he seemed to have thought of a new plan. In a corner of the palace, Princess Alexandria was bullying a maid again. The silver-haired youth silently watched all of this. Who would have thought the person before him was the previously most respected princess? The youth smiled contemptuously, but his mind again thought of adorable me. Perhaps even he hadn't noticed that I had become indispensable in his heart. The silver-haired youth pretended not to know and asked Alexandria what was wrong, and Alexandria scolded him for asking when he obviously knew. The silver-haired youth didn't care, instead calmly asking if she wanted to attend tonight's party. While speaking, he put a butterfly bow on Alexandria's head, but Alexandria angrily threw the butterfly bow on the ground. The silver-haired youth immediately revealed a cold smile. Alexandria was obviously frightened. The silver-haired youth just impassively put a necklace around her neck, then commanded Alexandria to begin competing for the throne. She obviously didn't dare resist this command. Alexandria recalled a year ago, when she had excitedly received her father's letter. What came instead was an order to cooperate with the silver-haired youth. Alexandria was unwilling to associate with him. What she found strange was that they had the same birthmark on their bodies, and the silver-haired youth often looked at her with pitying eyes. At this time, the silver-haired youth worriedly advised Alexandria not to bully the maids anymore. But Alexandria didn't buy it and harbored resentment in secret. The silver-haired youth once again revealed that eerie smile. As night fell, a maid walked alone in the palace, suddenly startled by a voice. She saw the silver-haired youth standing by the wall with a smile. Again, smiling eerily. He slowly approached the maid, looking at her with demonic eyes and tempting her to sign a contract with him. The maid was frightened and panicked. Suddenly, the silver-haired youth grew demon wings, clearly an adult appearance. He maliciously gripped the maid's wrist. In the empty corridor, only the demon's whispers could be heard. The silver-haired youth promised that by signing the contract, he could give her everything she wanted. The maid's eyes gradually lost their luster. It turned out the silver-haired youth had been casting spells on her all along. Soon, the maid's eyes became completely hollow, revealing a smile completely different from before. On the other side of the palace, the doctor reported on my condition. Gil couldn't help but roar that I had been unconscious for a week. He couldn't help but worry about my safety. The doctor explained he had done his best and now needed to wait. Suddenly, Ide's voice sounded behind him. "You wouldn't want to be reincarnated so early, would you?" Upon hearing this, the doctor's face changed dramatically. After all, no servant wasn't afraid of this little human devil. Then he laughed awkwardly. After Ide's brief stare, he saw through this doctor. Just a person whose heart had been corrupted by money. The doctor had no choice but to appeal to the prince for help, but ID wasn't having it. With a point of his finger, the originally arrogant doctor's face instantly changed, because his most hypocritical side had appeared as a painting out of thin air. The doctor hastily said he would find the Pope to save me. Then the prince also pressured him. After a series of threats, he ran away in panic. At this time, ID's face was full of regret, regretting not protecting me well. Faced with Gil's consolation, he only hung his head in shame. Gil looked at me and said that once I woke up, he would definitely teach me horseback riding. For the first time, the father and two sons felt so powerless. At this time, a servant suddenly entered, saying that Sophia had also fallen into a coma. Scene after scene of my past flashed through the prince's mind. Then he kissed my hand. Suddenly his expression became grave, as if his head was splitting with pain. Seeing this, the two Gil brothers also panicked, hurrying forward with concern. The prince quickly waved his hand to indicate it was nothing, because he was most worried about my physical condition. At this time, under the purple starry sky, my consciousness awakened on a cloud. Just as I was examining my surroundings, suddenly I saw the system panel. What shocked me was that I only had 2% health remaining. I recalled the fat guy's emotional breakdown, and eldest brother's heroic rescue, which made me worry about the safety of eldest brother Sophia and others. At this time, the system reminded me whether to choose paid resurrection. Otherwise, I would be eliminated. Faced with this choice, I felt speechless. I could only irritably choose yes. However, after resurrection, I would definitely be the brightest child in this world again. Thinking this way, my body gradually became tired. My form had already collapsed. And then I entered dreamland. When I woke up again, I had clearly understood the reason for the fat guy's behavior. All of this was because of necromancy. According to my memory, that was something Gil often used when completing assassination missions in the later stages. I didn't expect it to cause me trouble so early. Fortunately, I still had two brothers who would help me. Suddenly a scene appeared before me. It was the 3 little cats I kept at home. Looking at them, I couldn't help wondering if they were still living well without my care. At this time, the system appeared telling me I could choose one as my divine beast. This made me freeze in place. Could these 3 cute little guys really protect me? They couldn't just use their cuteness to attack others, could they? However, since I was so special, they should also have some special abilities. But choosing which one made me very conflicted. At this time, the system seemed to be giving me hints. I looked over and discovered a door. I had wanted to go out first before choosing a divine beast, but who knew it said I could only leave after making a choice. Then I used the remaining hints I had, and it told me the little cat's ability was cuteness. thinking of eldest brother and second brother's divine beasts. I couldn't help but hug the system panel and shout. Suddenly I thought again, wasn't it enough for little cats to just be cute? In a fit of anger, I demanded all the little cats become my divine beasts. 3 little cats instantly poured into this space. I saw the 3 cats transform, changing color and leaping into my arms. This long-awaited reunion with them made me cry tears of joy. Just as I was rejoicing, I suddenly discovered there were actually 4 little cats. This made me freeze in place. Looking at this new little cat, after brief consideration, I was captivated by its cuteness. Then I prepared to leave this place. With the 4 of them, I felt more confident facing future hardships. At this time, Father and the Pope were guarding beside my bed. They saw golden light emanating from the Pope's hands. Suddenly, that incompetent doctor burst in and patted the Pope. The Pope looked displeased. The doctor awkwardly said I was beyond saving. The Pope angrily pushed away his hand and wanted to throw him out. They saw the doctor's expression become grave, because he still wanted to constantly monitor the situation here. Just then, a hand grabbed him. The doctor looked, and it was clearly my 2 brothers holding him on both sides. Then red-haired Gil solemnly thanked the Pope. The black-haired youth confidently stated that I would definitely wake up. Gil's expression also improved. After they left, Father promised the Pope he would give him what he wanted if he successfully woke me up. Then the prince said anything was fine as long as he didn't make me marry him. The Pope was stunned, because he had indeed thought about it, nervously rubbing his hands. He still said he definitely would. He touched my forehead with one hand, golden light gradually appearing around him, while murmuring about falling in love with me at first sight. Finally, he began praying for my safety. The prince seemed to have heard something, and his expression was somewhat unpleasant. Then the 2 sat there stiffly. That doctor appeared behind the Pope again at some point, and the doctor's hand secretly exerting force, threateningly saying, "Make her wake up then." At this time, I suddenly sat up, startling both of them. I rubbed my eyes. Seeing this handsome young man again, I was very happy. I enthusiastically introduced myself as Celestine. The Pope's face immediately flushed, and he began stuttering. The prince looked over coldly, because he knew the Pope had always been trapped in the dungeon without even magic power. At that time, the Pope's heart had already yearned to know Celestine's name. All of this was because many years later, the Pope had already become a war god. Just as he achieved a staged victory and led his troops in retreat, on their retreat path, he saw me for the first time. I also immediately noticed him. I approached him saying, "Greetings, Pope," then extended my hand, but the Pope froze in place, then casually said his name was Hit. Through my rescuing others and constantly interacting with him, his feelings for me also arose. It was precisely because of this that he had always stayed by my side. After I awakened, the moment I took his hand was when he panicked. However, I was immediately shocked by his appearance. He seemed to see through everything, smiling and asking if I had chosen my divine beast.